Great. With that, I'll wrap my address and move on to our proceedings. Today we have a panel discussion, and our very own Morgan Freeman of the club, Mr. Mario Rozario, will be leading us through this panel discussion. The panelists on the discussion are Arpit, Arsheen, and Hardik, and the theme of the discussion is Beyond the Crisis. I believe it's going to be an absolutely amazing one, and I really can't wait for the same to be witnessed by all of us. Before I handle the proceedings to Mario, I'd like to invite our evaluator, Animesh, who is also an area director from Hyderabad, to hash out the speech objectives. Animesh, over to you.
Hello, thank you everyone for having me in your meeting. Well, as as Jeevan rightly said, he got the habit of shaving his head and now he doesn't need a facilitator. However, for today's meeting, Toastmaster Mario is playing the role of a facilitator. In a brainstorming session, the objectives for his project are to select a problem for a brainstorming session for which you serve as a facilitator, conduct a brainstorming session, and have participants reduce the list of ideas to the
facilitating discussion manual where I play the role of a facilitator. This particular project I'm doing is called a brainstorming session. Here's how the format would be. For the first minute, I will introduce what the problem is. Then for the next 6 minutes, and this segment does not need to be timed by the timer, I will be timing it. For the next 6 minutes, the panel will brainstorm possible solutions, and then for the next 12 to 13 minutes, they will narrow down on that particular solution based on their discussion. At the end of that, we should be having at least 1 or 2 clear outcomes of this entire panel discussion. Something which is really, really difficult if you watch Republic TV, but we'll try and make it possible out here. All right. The topic of today's panel is the crisis, the way forward out of this crisis. Should India open up the economy? Yes or no? And if so, how? Let me introduce the panel on stage. First member of the panel, and we will go with the Adage ladies first. She's a country head in Oxfam. Dr. Arsheen Chugh has moved across the length and breadth of the country and seen the country from the inside out. Please welcome our first panelist, Dr. Arsheen Chugh. All right. The second panelist, a techpreneur, an entrepreneur turned politician. Used to be a savvy tech politician, and now he's a minister of Legislative Assembly, a very powerful position in the government. Please welcome Hardik Shah. Well, we've got somebody from the somebody from the NGO, we've got somebody from the government. Who is missing? Well, we need someone from the business field. Please help me welcome my last panel participant, who is a key member, was one of the founding members of CII, CII, which is an industry body which tracks industry and business all throughout India. Mr. Arpit Sethi, who will be representing the business community. Welcome, Arpit Sethi. So, all 3 of you, I'm going to state the problem again. We are where we are today. We are in a crisis. What is the way forward? Should we open up or should we not open up? And even if we do, please come up with some recommendations on how. So for the first 6 minutes, I'd like each of you to take a minute each, introduce your stand, provide a solution, and then we'll go around and For the first 6 minutes, we'll just be giving solutions. Shall we go with who wants to go first? Let the person who called me here. Let's give government their due respect. Let's ask the MLA to go first. Hardik, you want to take the stage?
All right. Thank you, Mario. All right. So just to put forward the point that we are over here because we understand that for the last 3 odd weeks we have had a lockdown and the entire country has been down, and we realize that a lot of people around who the economy is down, the shops are shut, the industry is down, and only the essential services are down, are working currently. But we understand the decision of the government around 3 weeks back was to ensure protection of all people, all Indians around, and that was the purpose of the lockdown. But I think since we have flattened the curve to some extent, and today we do not see a major community spread happening, I think it's time to slowly and gradually revive the economy and start getting back to our feet in terms of businesses and industries, because it's not going to be very long till when we can survive without all the members of our country, all the citizens of a country making money. And we all understand that we are still a developing economy, and a very huge portion of our population lives on daily wages. And in the last few weeks, we have seen media reports on all of these laborers going back home and creating ruckus and creating issues around because they are not having food, clothing, and shelter available easily. And so while the government is making efforts to reach to them, it's not going to last a very long time. And I think it's time that we slowly and gradually starting the first baby steps to revive the economy so that we are back before the next quarter starts.
So when do you think you would be able to lift the curbs which are presently been on the system? Do you have
So based on the data that is currently available, we don't see it in the immediate future, because whatever information is coming in from the hospitals and the clinics and the doctors and our medical team, we still need to keep our restrictions on, at least in terms of travel and movement of people. So the entire curfew is going to take at least a few months, to be honest, to be completely off, where people have free movement, what they had 2 months back. But we see that right now out of 500 districts, 400 districts have zero reporting of cases, and at least those 400 districts is where we can start off with opening up the curfew, with limiting our movement from other districts to these districts. I think that could be a start, is what we're looking at currently.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go over to the representative from Oxfam, Arshin. What's your take on this?
So I think we need to look at the problem from the perspective of the people who have been affected the most here. So we need to understand that the crisis that has taken over, it has affected the 400 million workforce that is present in India. And out of that, if I roughly divide it into urban and rural, and then I calculate the urban poor and the rural poor, there are about 290 million people who are directly affected by it, which includes the agricultural laborers or the people who are non-agricultural but are in informal sectors like the MSMEs and the SMEs. So we need to look at the people who do not have the resources to plunge themselves out of this difficulty. And we need to actually understand what is the exact problem that they're facing. So all these people who I've just talked about, they include all our laborers, traders, tailors, all those who are working for Uber, Ola, Swiggy, all these laborers, they don't have any other option right now other than just waiting for when their jobs will start. And they cannot really go home. I read a news report recently which said that they had to wait there while out under bridges and under not even proper shelters. So we need to understand and classify them, and we need to have a solution for every problem that they are facing. They might be facing starvation. They might be facing...
Sorry to cut you in. So what solution can you recommend since you've seen their hardships?
So yeah, so there are a lot of initiatives that have already been started, and the initiatives have been by Zomato, by Swiggy. There's an initiative called Feeding the Wager. There's an initiative called Donate Card. There's a lot of crowdfunding and donation-based platforms that have started. So I think the first step is right. Obviously, we have to have care packages, and we kind of need to transfer our approach to being a welfare state where we provide for these people who are sitting at home. Other than that, we need to also start training them on skills that can mitigate this crisis and that can bring them out of this crisis. So I'll talk at length about all these initiatives during the
Thank you.
postpartum.
These two very good suggestions. I'm going to go to the third participant, Arpit, representative from the CII. Interesting to note that the previous panelist has just surprisingly laid no initiative at the feet of the government, but at the feet of the private sector, saying that, quoting examples from Zomato, nothing about the government spending bill at all. Would you like to state your stand and
True.
give a few
In fact,
ideas?
I would come to the aspect where the corporates can come in and actually help in this scenario at the very grassroots level, the people who are affected, the low income people. And actually, I'd like to start out with a very interesting quote I read from an economist. He said, in economics, for decades, nothing happens. And in months, decades happen. And that's truly what we are seeing right now. These times are unprecedented. It's important for businesses and individuals to not get paralyzed right now with what the crisis is throwing at us. Just give me 1 second. Sorry. 1 second. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. As I was saying, it's important not to be paralyzed right now by what's happening around us, but to take some measures that can help in the immediate term. What we see is there are two scenarios that we broadly see play out. One is where this downturn is short term, and we see businesses bounce back in about 5 to 7 months. That's it's unlikely, but that's a possible scenario right now. The second scenario is that where we see this for an extended period of time, where the effects are lingering for longer terms, and that's really where corporate India should start getting more and more affected. We would start seeing more drastic measures. Coming to Arshin's point, actually, there's a lot that has been done by the government, but there's still more things that we can do. One thing that the government has done is that they've made the 2% CSR that's mandated, or at least that's given in the law. That can also now be towards coronavirus activities. So that's one thing where corporates can directly help. So the corporates get say a benefit in terms of their finances, as well as the grassroots people get benefits. So that's one good thing the government has done. There have also been some stimulus packages announced by the government, but the longer term play out of how they will be implemented is yet to be seen.
Thank you. So just to get so I think a few of you have given a few suggestions, a few by Arpit and a few by Arshin. I think Hardik will give his eventually. Just to set the ball rolling, since we're talking about corporates, and since this discussion is pivotal toward corporates helping out, just another question for Arpit and Hardik. So it seems that we are placing a lot of the load on the shoulder of corporates, and as our panelist Arpit pointed out, if the short term, if it's to close, if the economy is not going to open in the short term, how are companies supposed to continuously spending on CSR when their budgets are going to be squeezed? Mr. I'm going to ask the government official, Mr. Hardik Shah, to comment on that. Are there any rebates you plan on giving to the corporates for this?
So, thank you. So what we've done in the last few months, few weeks already, we announced a few packages. Even today morning, we were in touch with RBI to ensure that the liquidity crisis is not resolved for the banks and the NBFC, so that the finance part is taken care of. We have tried to exempt all those EMI requirements which are there right now, because that is moratorium which is already provided to all the banks and NBFCs to further provide them back to the customers. And in terms of corporates also, we have given them the option to the banks to extend the loan dues and waive off a lot of interest and returns that need to be filed in the current month. So all this compliance is basically which is required to be done, which blocks a lot of money has been taken care of. Also in the last 15 days, we have released a huge amount of refund in terms of income tax and GST, which were blocked for the last 3 months, to ensure that the companies have the cash flow and liquidity coming in. So that a lot of steps are being taken at the government and at the macro level to ensure that the corporates and the banks have enough cash and liquidity with them. But it's now corporates to ensure that it reaches back down to every individual Indian that's around in the country, so that it cannot just be pushed at our level. It has to go down to the micro level, which can happen only when the corporates join hand with the government to get us stuck to war footing.
So, and we can see that there are a lot of initiatives being taken by the government, and there's also a huge $1 trillion package. I'm gonna move over to Arshin, who's been working with the NGOs. Arshin, do you see much of this investment trickling down to the people who need it the most? Because what we are hearing is a lot of investment, a lot of money is being spent. What do you see from your side?
So actually, what I would propose is, I think I didn't cover the part where I wanted the government to step in. So there are a lot of things that the government can actually help with, the urban poor and the rural poor. There's a lot of direct benefit transfer that can be put in the Jan accounts of the poor people. There's a lot of food grain on credit that can be bought for these for at least 3 to 4 months, as Hardik rightly suggested that this won't be lifted for any sooner. There's a lot of crowdfunding platforms that are also initiated by the government, and there's a platform which is called Invest India, which is a database of all the crowdsourcing funding platforms that we have, where you can go and donate. So I think it's a synergy between the corporates and the government that we need at this point. It's just not the government or not the corporate separately, but we need it for everyone. But I think as we generally impart these to the poor, there are a lot of administrative glitches. The money is not exactly reaching the poor, as you rightly said, Mario. There's still a lot of work that has to be done. So I think it is going to be done by a good relationship between both of these sectors.
So, but forgive me for going wrong. So, how the direct benefit DBT is supposed to work is that the government can directly credit the money into the relative person's account. So, I mean, this was tested some time ago, right? I'm just going to go back to Hardik. I mean, wasn't this in place already before the crisis came? Direct benefit transfer.
So before that, basically what happened, what was going on right now. Sorry. Yeah. So what I'm mentioning over here is that yes, the DBT is something that is the government actively looking at. We had already promised in our last budget a few DBTs on different specific categories as well. What you need to understand right now is that since the last, we have a fiscal deficit also needs to be taken care of, and we cannot just go on printing notes or taking money from external sources, because that will impact us a lot on the longer term as well. And since last 2 months, the government also has no source of revenue because of this the economy being shut. So while we're trying our best from our side to ensure that the funds, whatever we can do, and transfer them to based on this Jan Dhan Yojana and the other cards that we have created in the last 2-3 years of government. But what a major focus has been on the easing liquidity in the market, so that the corporates do not come back and tell us that we had to fire people because we couldn't afford salaries. So yes, DBT is something the government is actively looking at, but we are checking on the people who are below the poverty line, and so that we ensure that the funds reach them over every month. We are working with the state governments to ensure the food essentials are given to all the ration card holders at a particular predefined quota. The government has enough stock. That's what we are analyzing with the agriculture ministry as well, that the food agriculture production is on track, and we have not stopped that. We are ensuring the services are being provided to all the local kirana stores as well. So we are working very actively with the state government on one end to ensure the food essentials and the ration reaches people in terms of the ration cards that the whole. The DBT is something which the government is actively looking at, but we are not putting anything on that right now.
Thank you. So I'm going to go over to Arpit now, and I know Arpit, you had you had made some suggestions earlier on. Just before I go back to that, I just want to know, how long can businesses go with the shutdown? I mean, there are companies who are burning cash day by day, and malls, there's business establishments. Of course, there's some like Zomato. The food deliveries are still going on, but there's malls, there's showrooms which are shut. I mean, are you getting pushback from the industry to open earlier than possible? And would you like to share some of that?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, what we're seeing right now is, as I mentioned earlier, this is a very important backdrop to note that these are unprecedented times. Businesses, neither governments have not dealt with this before. And that's where, it becomes a catch-22 situation. If businesses for the shorter term good do actually say that, yes, we would want to open up, it could actually lead to more spread of the virus and a much larger hit to the economy in the longer term. Whereas if you say that, okay, let's stay shut for the larger good, then you do risk, bleeding out dry in terms of finances. So that's definitely a, a point. What we are recommending, to at least the larger industry is it's not quite, right to place the burden of managing this whole scenario upon the government or the social workers at large. Obviously, everyone has to come together and work on this. Uh, what some of the suggestions that I have received from the larger, the industrial brethren, have been that there are some steps that any business can take, large or small. We have to see even the DBT aspect can help to directly the smaller community, as well as some of the subsidies and some of the liquidity measures that Hardik suggested can affect businesses. But some of the things that almost everyone can do is going to be communicate with your employees that they're not going to be immediately fired. At least put them at peace, at some sort of make them feel comfortable, because as long as there is less panic, you still have time to work out things. Couple of other things that you can do is, at least for the senior management who draw out much larger packages, you can defer their benefits to in the form of ESOPs, or in the form of larger revenue related compensation much later on, when you've had the time to recover, and divert those funds to people who need it the most right now, the daily wage laborers, the people such as Uber drivers, such as delivery personnel who really needed the most, who do in fact not very different from hand to mouth right now. And also there are certain things. The third thing, I'd like to just end by saying, the third thing that the industry can do right now is use this time for training employees. We can all borrow from the example Toyota set in the Asian crisis of 1997, where for around a period of 4 years, they chose not to lay off employees, but they actually used the time to train their employees. And when they emerged out much, much stronger. So these are just some things that we see we can do together.
Thank you. So a lot of points being thrown in here. I'm just going to coalesce around three, because I feel that the ideas should be one which cross all three different spans. So I'm just going to throw in a few ideas here. So Arpit, given the fact that the industry may be looking at months of no turnaround and shutters down, are you expecting any kind of a tax cut from the government?
Yes, absolutely. We are expecting, and we have written a letter to the Ministry of Finance in this regard as well. We recently saw that the RBI has announced a rate cut, but the feedback we're getting from the industry has been that we need a further rate cut of at least 50 basis points, so that the lending rates come down, so that the interest burdens come down as of now for businesses. This, in fact, will have a direct impact on the amount of funds they have to support their employees.
This is rate cut. What about corporate tax? Do you expect that corporate tax could
Even on
also be dropped?
Even on the corporate tax front, we expect, or we are requesting at least a 5% rate cut, tax cut for this financial year at least. We will see how the larger term picture plays out, but at least for this financial year, we expect a 5% tax cut at least.
Over now to Hardik. Is that something your government would be able to accommodate?
We have demands for DBT, we have demands for food grains, we have cost to be covered somewhere. So right now the government is not actively looking at rate cuts, because that is not a priority. The priority of the government right now is to ensure that all the people and Indians are safe and sound, and they get their rations, they get their food, they get their money to survive, however long this has to last. All right. So the priority right now is, instead of rate cut, we would like to see the economy coming back to normal, and where the corporates are making money, making profit, to be able to pay those taxes and salaries directly. So that has been the focus right now of the government, to get everything back on track. So rate cut is not the agenda at the moment. Probably once we get back to a footing, we get back working, the engine starts, is that we can look at a rate cut. Because right now, since the income is zero, the profit is zero, so there is no tax to be payable in which way, so the time we come back to normal.
Yeah. So when and there are some businesses which are working now, right? Very, very skeletal staff, and you have to admit that they are also carrying part of the burden of the people on them. So while you may open after a few weeks or month, you are going to factor a rate cut. Is that going to be part of the like you said? So is that going to be part sooner or later?
we could look at explore those options to see. For the time being, we have given a lot of deferments of all payments, the GST payments, the TDS payments, the income tax payments. They've all been deferred by 3 months to ensure that there is no immediate liquidity problem from a government perspective with them. And like I mentioned earlier, as well, we have issued a lot of reports to all these corporates in the last 30 days to ensure that is taken care of. So right now, our priority is to ensure liquidity is there in the market and money is there with the corporates and local Indians right now, and deferment all possible payments, so that immediately no corporate has to look at, choose between paying the government and or pay the interest versus paying the employees. We're trying to look at that they can focus on their employees at hand, and government can be taken care of later on, and we can discuss that separately with them probably a month or two later once we start seeing the engine functioning again.
Thank you. I'm going to move over to Arshin now. Arshin, from your point, from the ground, should the government open up in another few, in post May 3rd? And no, we are hearing that the government is doing a lot of things, but from the ground level, what are you seeing? And if we are to open up, seeing what you see, what would your recommendations be?
Okay, so I was recently a part of the international roundtable for NGOs all across the world, and there was a very good point put forward by one person from Singapore. She said that there is a $1,000 that is being transferred to every person who is just above the poverty line and have lost their job because of some reason or the other. They're not exactly below the poverty line, but because of maybe the interstate migration problem or anything, they have lost the job. So I think taking a cue from the universal basic income structure or Scandinavian countries or what Kerala has implemented in its own state, there is some amount of money that can be directly transferred to these laborers' account, so that they can be reassured that they have this and they don't need to rush to their own areas. That will help us in mitigating the crisis health-wise as well as economy-wise. And I think one point that we did not touch on at all was that there's a lot of health crisis that is happening mentally and physically. So for the rural areas, I'd like to put forth that there's a lot of problem with menstruation and a lot of issues with mental health and domestic violence cases that are increasing and are on a rise. So we also need the help from the government as well as the corporates on how we can keep counseling sessions and how we can afford free counseling sessions for all these people who are in the rural areas or even the urban poor, and even the normal urban people who can afford to go to a session. We need to make a database of all these counselors, and we need to impart a lot of mental health counseling that is needed at this time.
Hold on. To Hardik, can this be made part of the? Is this part of the immediate priority of the government, or?
I think right now all our health officers are busy fighting the COVID-19. So that's where I like these NGOs to step in, and through their counselors, if they can help us in terms of reaching out to these people who need any guidance or assistance in terms of mental and physical health, because we do not want our health officers to be fighting two battles at the same time. So I think if the government is right now priority is to ensure that we eradicate COVID-19 from at least the soil of India. And I think in the next 1 month, if we do not see a spike in cases and no additional inflows from outside and no community spread happening, we'll be able to control it largely. But during for the next 30 days, the government's priority is going to be on COVID-19. And while we are educating our doctors and nurses to ensure that the patients are treated well, treated right, the family members are treated well, they have been given sufficient information, they have been taken care of to the best possible extent, however they can. But yes, we understand that when they are in stress, because it's an unseen thing, no one knows how it happens, what is the next step forward. So yes, it is unprecedented for all of us. So we are educating our all health ministries across the states to ensure that whatever support we can give from our side, we'll be happy to give. But that is where I'll request Arshin and the NGO teams to help in and support all our medical officers at whatever capacity they can.
Minister, I really like to commend you for accolades on the NGO. I'd like to remind you that just a few years ago, your government had taken NGOs to task and made it very difficult for them to get money from abroad. We put certain rules saying that NGOs, some of them are illegal, getting money from outside. And now at this moment of crisis, you expect NGOs to step up to the table and carry the similar weight. Well, I'm not sure whether Oxfam has anything to say about that. Do we have a Oxfam?
Yes. So actually, I do have a point. The number of cases in terms of domestic violence and mental health issues has catapulted at this time. And while we have the expertise and while we have the people that can support it, I think what we would essentially want from the government is numbers. We don't have the numbers to support the economy that is flailing at this point. No, economy in terms of the mental health of the people, the population of people in India who are suffering from these cases. We need a huge support from the government as well as the corporates if they can step in. We need psychologists and people all around the world who can maybe pitch in and do
Is
their
there,
bit.
great. Is there something which the industrialists can do, Arpit? Is that something which your group can possibly figure out, help out with?
Yes, yes, absolutely. In fact, coming to the point, what is the immediate role industrialists can play in this is one. We already have a lot of industrialists chipping in with thousands of crores pledged towards support in the rehabilitation efforts. From the damage from the virus, and that can directly flow to the grassroots level to NGOs. As mentioned by Arshin, which can set up camps, which can procure more PPE, personally protective equipments, and actually divert some of the manufacturing capabilities that a lot of manufacturing companies have towards making more equipment that's needed to fight the virus. That's something we're actively exploring, all the entities that can do this. Um, so that's one of the things. One more thing I'd like to uh, at least point out to our friends from the ministry is that while we understand and we fully support in all the efforts that you're taking to contain the spread of the virus, may I also ask you to broaden the list of companies or the list of NGOs or entities that are eligible under the tax bracket, the tax benefit of the 80G and the allied sections, so that people at large and even corporations are more inclined to help directly in the form of monetary support and actually get a tax break from it. So that's one thing I'd like to suggest to the ministry.
Okay, thank you, guys, ladies, gentlemen, my wonderful panel. I think we have run out of time. So I'm just going to summarize the 3 points which I've taken from this entire discussion, as tough as it may have been. Thank you so much to the Governor Hardik, who's joined us. And we've clearly seen that, okay, I can see the green now, I know. We've clearly seen that the government is doing, in fact, more than what we sometimes, accuse it of. There's so much stimulus which has gone in and so much which is being done, which we really don't see. So very good points also raised by the industry, and how the industry is stepping up, taking pay cuts, and also striving to keep open. A lot of initiatives by Zomato, the 2% CSR, and lovely to hear from the Oxfam also. A lot of work happening on the ground in India by NGOs such as Oxfam. Issues which really are not heard of too much these days, like mental health, the result of staying at home too much, and the fact that this is not a lifestyle we're used to, happening at the rural area, and good to see people who normally don't start, who can not normally sit across the same table without having an argument, discuss things in a very mature sense. Of course, I know we all have titles here, but still great that we were able to exchange some points as how businesses can step in and help NGOs in the absence of government, which has much other priorities. So with these few points, I would like to thank all the panelists from the bottom of my heart, Arshin, Hardik, and Arpit, for number one, not only taking time to attend, but doing a substantial amount of reading on the topic before you came to the panel, so as to make this discussion not only lively but very, very informative. It's been my pleasure to be able to host this discussion, and with that I now hand it over back to the Vice President of Education / Governor / Hardik Shah. Over now.
I'll request Jeevan to take over since he